Dog howls at a picture frame. What the family finds inside will leave you in tears. The clock on the mantelpiece struck midnight, its chime echoing faintly through the stillness of the house. The soft glow of a nightlight in the hallway barely illuminated the shadows stretching across the living room. Amid the silence, a sound broke through, a low, mournful howl that sent shivers up Sarah's spine. She sat upright on the couch, clutching her blanket tightly. Her golden retriever, Max, stood in the corner of the room, his ears pricked and his gaze fixed intently on the wall. His deep, resonant howl filled the air again, this time tinged with urgency. Sarah frowned, her heart pounding. Max wasn't the type to make a fuss over nothing. She glanced over to where he was staring. It was the picture frame. The photograph inside was an old family portrait, taken years ago during a summer picnic. Everyone was smiling, her parents, her brother Jack, and even little Max, who had been just a puppy then. The frame had hung in that spot for years, a quiet witness to the ebb and flow of family life. So why now? What had caught Max's attention? "Max," Sarah called softly, her voice trembling. The dog turned to look at her, his expressive brown eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Concern? Without hesitation, he returned his focus to the frame, letting out a series of sharp barks. Sarah stood, her curiosity tinged with unease. She approached the frame, her bare feet making soft creaks on the wooden floor. The closer she got, the more Max's barking intensified. All right, she murmured, reaching up to lift the frame off its hook. It felt heavier than she remembered, and a strange chill seemed to emanate from it. Turning the frame over, Sarah noticed something odd. The backing was loose, as if it had been tampered with. Her fingers hesitated for a moment before she slid. It opened. A folded piece of yellowed paper fluttered out, landing softly on the floor. Sarah froze. What was this? Her hands trembled as she picked up the paper, unfolding it carefully. The edges were worn, the handwriting faint but legible. It was a letter. As her eyes scanned the words, she felt a lump form in her throat. "Dearest family," it began. Her mind raced. Who had written this? And why had it been hidden for so long? She looked down at Max, who had stopped barking and was now sitting quietly at her feet, his gaze unwavering. It was as if he understood the gravity of the moment. But before she could read further, the sound of creaking floorboards upstairs made her blood run cold. Someone or something was in the house. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. Silence. Max growled low, his fur bristling as he moved to stand protectively in front of her. Clutching the letter tightly, Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Was it just the old house settling, or was there more to this night than she had anticipated? And what did the mysterious letter hold? A secret, a warning, or something far more sinister? As the weight of the mystery settled around her, Sarah knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Whatever the letter contained, whatever had drawn Max to the picture frame, it was about to change everything. With Max by her side, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. Little did she know the answers she sought would lead to a revelation so profound, it would leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about her family and herself. Sarah's hands trembled as she folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. Max was still alert, his growl low and steady, his gaze fixed on the staircase. The creaking sound had stopped, but the air in the house felt charged, like the calm before a storm. "Stay with me, Max," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog didn't need to be told twice. He followed her closely as she crept toward the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. With each step she ascended, the old wooden stairs groaned beneath her weight. The hallway at the top of the stairs was bathed in shadows, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon outside the window. Sarah scanned the hallway, her breath shallow. The doors to the bedrooms were closed, except for one. The door to her late grandmother's room stood slightly ajar. Her grandmother's passing had left a void in the family. The room had been untouched since the funeral 6 months ago. It had always been a place of comfort, filled with the scent of lavender and the warmth of her grandmother's presence. Now it felt cold and unfamiliar, as if the air itself resisted her approach. Max let out a soft whine, pressing close to Sarah's leg as she nudged the door open. The room was exactly as it had been left, a neatly made bed, a stack of books on, the nightstand and the old rocking chair by the window. But something was off. A faint metallic glint caught Sarah's eye near the chair. She stepped closer, her pulse quickening. There, nestled between the folds of a knitted throw, was a small key. Sarah picked it up, its cool surface sending a shiver through her fingers. It was an antique, the kind you'd see in a mystery novel, with an ornate design that hinted at secrets locked away for decades. "What were you hiding, Grandma?" she murmured. Max barked suddenly, startling her. His attention was now focused on the wardrobe in the corner of the room. "Max, what is it?" she asked, her voice shaking. The dog pawed at the wardrobe door, his barking growing more insistent. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, Sarah approached the wardrobe. Her hand hovered over the handle for a moment before she pulled the door open. Inside, everything looked normal, rows of neatly hung dresses and a stack of boxes on the floor. But Max wasn't done. He shoved his nose against the back panel of the wardrobe, barking furiously. Sarah hesitated, then ran her fingers along the wood. She stopped when she felt a faint groove, a hidden compartment. She pressed against it, and with a soft click, the panel swung open to reveal a narrow space. Inside was a small ornate box covered in dust. Sarah lifted it out, her hands shaking. She placed it on the bed and used the key to unlock it. The lid creaked as it opened, revealing its contents: an old photograph, a locket, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The photograph showed a man Sarah didn't recognize, standing arm in arm with her grandmother. The locket contained a picture of the same man and a lock of hair. The letters, however, held the real mystery. The top one was addressed to her grandmother, written in the same handwriting as the letter Sarah had found in the picture frame downstairs. Sarah's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon. The first letter began with a single line that sent a chill down her spine. "My dearest Eleanor, I fear the truth will one day come to light, and when it does, it will change everything." Before she could read further, a sudden loud bang came from downstairs. Max barked wildly, rushing toward the door. Sarah's heart raced. Someone, or something, was in the house again. She clutched the bundle of letters tightly and followed. Max down the stairs, her mind spinning. What truth had her grandmother hidden, and who or what was trying to stop her from finding out? Sarah's heart pounded as she reached the base of the stairs, clutching the bundle of letters like a lifeline. The house was eerily quiet, save for the sound of Max's paws clicking on the wooden floor as he bolted toward the living room. "Max, wait!" Sarah called, her voice cracking. She followed, her breath shallow, fear knotting her stomach. The living room was bathed in the pale glow of moonlight. Max stood rigid in front of the picture frame's empty spot on the wall, his growl low and guttural. For a moment, Sarah saw nothing amiss, but then her eyes caught it, a shadow moving across the room, slow and deliberate. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. The shadow froze. From the corner of the room, a figure stepped into the light. It was a man, tall, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to hold a storm of emotion. Sarah staggered back, clutching the letters tightly. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man raised his hands, a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, his voice tinged with sadness. "My name is Thomas. He hesitated, his gaze falling on the letters in Sarah's hands. "I see you've found them." "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the puzzle. "How do you know about these? And why were you in my house?" Thomas sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. "I wasn't sure they'd still be here," he said. "But I had to know if Eleanor kept them, if she kept me." "Kept you?" Sarah echoed, her confusion mounting. Thomas gestured toward the letters. "Read them," he said simply. "You deserve to know the truth." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the first letter. The words spilled across the page, painting a picture of a love story shrouded in secrets. Her grandmother, Eleanor, had been engaged to another man before marrying Sarah's grandfather. That man was Thomas. The letters revealed that Eleanor and Thomas had been deeply in love, but her family had pressured her to break off the engagement, citing societal expectations. Heartbroken but loyal to her family, Eleanor had reluctantly ended things. Unbeknownst to anyone else, she had been pregnant at the time. Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she read further. Eleanor had given birth to a baby boy, Thomas and her son, but had been forced to give him up for adoption to avoid scandal. The photograph in the box upstairs was of Eleanor and her baby boy taken on the day she said goodbye to him. That boy, Thomas said, his voice trembling, was me. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. She stared at Thomas, her mind reeling. You're saying you're my grandmother's son? My great-uncle? Thomas nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I never knew her growing up, he said, but I found out the truth years ago, after my adoptive parents passed. I've been searching for her ever since. I thought, maybe she'd want to see me. His voice broke. But I was too late. Sarah felt a wave of emotion crash over her, grief, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of connection to this stranger who wasn't so much a stranger after all. But why now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why come here tonight? Thomas looked down at Max, who had stopped growling and was now sitting quietly, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. I saw the obituary, he said. I thought I'd lost my chance to meet her, but when I saw this house was still in the family, I had to know if there was anything left behind, anything that could tell me who she really was. Sarah's mind raced as she thought back to her grandmother's warmth, her love for her family, and the unspoken sadness that had always seemed to linger in her eyes. She never talked about this, Sarah said softly, but she kept everything, the letters, the photo. She loved you. Tears streamed down Thomas's face. I just needed to know that, he said. I needed to know she didn't forget me. Sarah stepped forward, placing the letters in his hands. She didn't, she said. She never stopped loving you, and now you're not alone anymore. Max barked softly, breaking the tension. Sarah looked down at him, a small smile breaking through her tears. He knew, she said. Max knew there was something here, something important. Thomas knelt to pet Max, his hand trembling. Dogs always seem to know, he said. They feel things we can't. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, the weight of the night's revelations began to lift. Sarah and Thomas sat together, poring over the letters and sharing stories of the woman who had connected them in ways they never imagined. For the first time in years, the house felt whole again. Its secrets finally laid to rest. The warmth of the morning sun poured through the windows, casting a golden glow across the room. Sarah sat with Thomas on the living room couch, the bundle of letters spread out before them on the coffee table. Max lay at their feet, his tail wagging lazily, as if he too felt the peace settling over the house. For hours, they exchanged stories. Thomas spoke of the life he had lived, his childhood with his adoptive parents, his search for answers, and the years of longing that had finally led him here. Sarah shared her memories of Eleanor, painting a picture of a woman who was strong, kind, and deeply loving, even as she carried the burden of a secret she could never share. She must have wanted you to find this, Sarah said, gesturing to the letters. She could have destroyed them, but she didn't. She kept them safe all these years. Thomas nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude and a lingering sadness. I think she wanted me to know the truth someday, even if she couldn't tell me herself. This is more than I ever hoped for. Max let out a soft bark, drawing their attention. He nudged his nose against the photograph that had fallen to the floor. Thomas picked it up, studying the image of his younger self with Eleanor. She was holding me so tightly, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think even then she didn't want to let me go. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. She didn't. Not really. She loved you, Thomas. And now you're part of this family again. She'd be so happy to know that. Thomas smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. Thank you, Sarah, for letting me be here, for sharing all of this with me. I feel like I've found a piece of myself I didn't even know was missing. The two of them carefully placed the letters, the photograph, and the locket back in the ornate box. Sarah promised to keep it safe, a testament to the love and resilience that had brought them together. As the morning stretched on, Thomas stood to leave, reluctant but understanding that this was just the beginning of their connection. Max trotted to his side, tail wagging enthusiastically as if giving his blessing. "Thank you, Max," Thomas said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "You got a good nose for what matters most." Sarah walked Thomas to the door, the weight of the night's events replaced by a sense of closure and hope. "You'll come back, won't you?" she asked. "Of course," Thomas said, his smile genuine. "We're family now." As Thomas walked down the path, the morning light framed him in a warm glow. Max barked softly, watching him go before returning to Sarah's side. She looked down at her loyal companion, her heart full. "You were right all along, weren't you, boy? You knew there was something we needed to find." Max wagged his tail in agreement, his eyes shining with contentment. Sarah glanced back at the house, feeling its walls breathe easier now that its secrets had been unearthed. She knew there was still so much to process, but for now she was content. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah knelt beside Max, wrapping her arms around him. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy." And as the morning sun climbed higher, filling the house with light, Sarah and Max stood together, ready to embrace the new chapter that lay ahead. A chapter built on truth, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. What did you think of this emotional journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart.